Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various news from topics and meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube channel under the channel of Zenitsu, and it's on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to leave a rating, like, follow, subscribe, whatever, depending on your social media platform of choice that you're choosing to watch or listen on. Today, I am back with some of my members from Team Zero, Nikki and Headless, and we are going to be talking about the new automated client that got released. So before we get into that and the two events that we have to cover, well, here's the question of the week, and the big question is, how do you tend to test? So these digital clients are not necessarily made to replace the entire game. It's mostly supposed to be designed as a testing tool because these are fan-made, they're free, they'll have all of the cards and whatever. So most of the time, that's an environment that's built for testing, but not everyone uses them for testing. So how do you guys tend to do your testing?
For us, Hunter, you're muted by the way. So, for us, when we do testing, aside from like now that before Sim, it was either Paper Play Proxy or Project Draco. Project Draco was a newer thing because I think that came around during BT14. I think is when we actually started seeing it, active. But before that, it was just like Paper Play, and then like kind of just buying the other best decks of the format, putting them together, and then testing against that. Eggman Events is a very good website for like what is good in the meta, just because like it's a lot of representation and then like kind of just adjusting from there.
Okay, okay.
I know a lot of Mirage lists I was looking at. Back during the Mirage depression that was BT14 with not BT13 with Royal Knights. A lot of decks weren't on the Gao play. Everyone was just like, no, we're on Madoki, we're on Gao gain memory, and then we're on like crappy rookies. And then I started using it when other people started seeing it too. That like the drop Gao the search 3 is still good in the deck. And it's like a 2 of now.
Okay, okay. What about you, Honcho? I know technically you're in the same group as Nikki, but do you use any other external tools for testing or any other methods for testing?
So a lot of the times, as we're going into a new meta, I always look at like JP results. I kind of see what they're doing. You have to take a lot of what they're doing with a grain of salt because they're a different format, so they only are best of one. So a lot of their lists sometimes are more so tuned for that, or they're completely fine with high rolling like one ups. But I like to use those for like data just to kind of get an idea of like what was getting played and where you can kind of take things. And then of course that kind of tells you like for the English formats like whatever was kind of best deck is what's going to basically be best deck here in America because everybody's just kind of gonna follow that trend for a bit until they figure it out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I basically just use a lot of online stuff for testing. I don't really do a whole lot of paper testing. I probably should, but I just am really, really, really lazy and I don't feel like printing out proxies. So most of my testing was like tabletop and Drazel and stuff like that. And now we have a new online client. But outside of the absolute butchered intro and the question of the week, which obviously extends to you guys, the audience, as well. If you feel free to tell me your thoughts on how you test down in the comments below. But we have some events to go over. I think we covered. Did we cover Core's Online Ultimate Cup last time? I don't
I think
remember.
so.
I think so because that was on the 7th, which was exactly a week ago.
We
Um,
kind of talked about it. I think I mentioned some of the Royal Knights lists that ended up doing well, like the second place finish.
Yeah, I guess I'll just go over it real quick, like extra super quick, just to speed things along.
That's
Uh,
the one I'm
so
remembering.
yeah, so if anyone is curious, first play. This was about what 2 weeks ago. Yeah, this was the event that was 2 weeks ago. So Red Hybrids won it. followed by Royal Knights Armor, Lugamon, Leviamon, Leomon, Lugamon, God, I hate when they put Mega Gargamon and change it to bunnies or rapids. They need to get better with their naming convention. But that aside, Rapidmon, Mirage, Royal Knights, Mirage, Numemon, Mirage, Armor, Numemon, Marcus. So that was the core Ultimate Cup in a nutshell. And then we had a May online regional from Tech and a core May regional as well. So going over the Tech first, we had actually a pretty good diverse spread. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different decks in top 16s, which is pretty good. So not one deck was like hardcore dominating, except the ones that are obviously Mirage and Numemon. Those seem to be like literally the best two decks, because this is yet again another event where Mirage took it. And then coming in second was Divas, Yellow Vaccine, Mirage, Hunters, Armor, Numemon, Sekon, Mirage, Belphamon, Shine, Numemon, Jellymon, Red Hybrids, and Numemon. All of these decks have already previously topped before, so there's nothing really interesting that's going on inside of them. Probably the only thing that's like actually noteworthy is looking at the yellow hybrid list, or not yellow hybrid, yellow vaccine, because they're trying to transition into using the armor stuff without the, the good cards that are coming in the next set. But they're trying, and it's still doing well because
it's just Venus, Seraphi. There's no like bigger payoff than that right now.
Yeah, it's Venus, Seraphi, and then they also are splashing Quartz, which is oddly enough a data, or Quantum, which is a data type instead of a vaccine, but Quantum is just actually that strong of a card. And yeah, the list is just trying and preparing itself to be armor vaccines, which is notable because vaccines has a whole bunch of like depth, because vaccine trait, we talked about it last week, there's just too many. So that creates a whole bunch of different builds, and they're all playing mostly similar cards. It's just your top end dictates what your middle end is going to be. And then you're like, your level 5s and level 3s are like all the same. So the deck is getting homogenized, and it's becoming very boring, even though it does have a lot of different paths, you could say. Then that brings us to the core online May regional. This was last weekend, because the one that just passed this was the one that just passed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this was last weekend, and Devas actually ended up taking first place. This was another meta or like tournament that had a pretty decent spread of people. There was, or in terms of decks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 as well. Numemon obviously being at the top with 3 representation. Mirage only had 2, and Yellow Vaccine had 3, and then everything else had 1. So Devas won, followed by Numemon, then Alphamon, which was ran by Lychee, who is the best black player in probably the game. He's the person, if I want information on what black deck to run, he's usually my go-to to look for. So seeing him win with Alphamon is pretty good. Then we had Sekon, Lugamon, Mirage, Armor, Numemon, Yellow Vaccine, Red Hybrid, Yellow Vaccine, Jessmon. That's a huge surprise. Then Vaccine, Allforce, and Mirage. So we had probably about 2 really big upsets, which was Jessmon and Allforce. This is the first time making it into the BT15 meta, and everything else was kind of known. Even Alphamon has already had like 1 or 2 representations before this, but I'll go over the Alphamon list because that's what a lot of people like. And this is basically just OTK. Like, it is pure OTK with trying to set up a final Zubagon punch. Well, I guess it's not really OTK. He's not running the Sunarizumon. If he was running Sunarizumon, I'd say that's more pure OTK, but final Zubagon punch is just what's hard carrying this deck. I mean, outside of the fact that it's just a good deck, it's very consistent and fast. And then the other decks to mention, like I said, was Jessmon. So they are going for a GX build, which gives it both the offense and defense that the deck kind of wants, just because Genku X gives you the protection and Jesmon X gives you the aggression. And then it's just playing Jesmon. Like, I don't really know what else to tell you. They trimmed a lot of fat, though, from this build compared to some others. So they're only on 8 red Huckmon rookies, and they're only on 6 Bauhucks, as well as 6 Saviors and 6 Megas, and then 3 GXs. So they're really using those extra spaces to run offense training and memory boost just to try to make sure they could find their parts and pieces, which is kind of interesting considering Genku is a black card and everything else is red, and then you have 9 Sistermons that are white. So there's a lot of things that you just can't search for, but they're hoping that their search tools, it seems like, just hits the Jesmon line, and that's it.
I'm a little sad about Jesmon moving forward. That poor Gankumon gets kicked out of the deck for
Oh,
Magna.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last deck that's noteworthy is armor, or not armors. Close enough to armors because it is another VMon based deck in the form of Ulforce, and this Ulforce actually is using the starter deck Magna. We kind of talked about it last week, how like absurdly good that Magna is, and seeing it in this Ulforce list kind of reassures that perspective. So outside of that, it is they just have a lot of really random stuff too. Like the Joe is kind of weird, but like it makes sense because the Magna is source stripping, and then Joe just interacts with source stripping. So it's just another way to use Joe while having another cheap tamer out. They're using Davis to be able to play the VMons. You have the Met and Sora for when your hand is pretty good and filled. Sora and Joe, another way to source strips, which just interacts again with Magna, making it even stronger. So everything here just kind of seems like it makes sense. It's a lot of, again, fat trimming in terms of Digimon ratios, and they're just running more search tools and a lot more extra tamers. But outside of that, yeah, these older decks with a good amount of luck still can do well. Which leads us to our main topic, which is the online client. So, Huang Zero and his merry band of friends. I don't think Huang actually worked on the server or like worked on it. I think he just promoted it, but he also organized it, I believe. But regardless, he helped develop a new fan-made online digital client for the game. It is fully automated. What are your thoughts?
Uh, the sim is good. Very customizable. It reminds me of early YGO Pro, which all sims kind of do that now. I think my biggest issues is just the getting used to the interface. I know when I was testing Dark Knightmon, there was a problem with Monitamon. Because Monitamon says you can specify 2 cards with Twilight and or Dark Knight or Skull Knight in their names. I could only grab 1 target. I don't know if again I'm pretty sure it was just like it was hard to navigate the UI to actually select the second target for that effect, and I only got 1. It was a bot match because I wanted to see how it would work, so at least now I know. Hey, you got to be very specific, like how you grab like up to 2 cards. The options to allow you to oh yeah, cards are automatically put at the bottom because I really don't care about the order. But the default is to select does allow for just the skill ceiling to be a lot higher now.
Yeah, I think like the tool is actually pretty cool for trying to learn specific rule interactions because, correct me if I'm wrong, there, at least on that development team, is a judge helping flesh out some of the more nuanced card interactions and rulings to make it as smooth as possible for the automation, right?
Correct. They do have the judges on staff to help code it correctly. That's why it was like going into BT 16. we only get what 16 for like what, a week or two before we have like a month at most before we
Yeah,
go
we
into
get 16 for a
EX6.
month.
Um,
Hmm.
from what I saw in the Discord of what they're talking about, like BT16 will be released 1 to 2 weeks after BT16. But to me, that's just like, well, what's the point? Like, you have 2 weeks to play the sim with BT16 before you got to start practicing EX6, and even then, like 2 weeks after that, and then like they're on a numbers crunch, and I understand like they need time to code everything, but it does feel relatively because like Project Draco, the moment something gets spoiled, you have access to it, as opposed to the sim where you're kind of like, well, I'm stuck waiting for the official like update from them to like put the cards in, and the card sets are relatively big. Um, hopefully the groundwork they have and like certain releases are caught up faster. Otherwise, this year the sim is just kind of like the baby steps, and next year the sim takes off. Just because we're heading into super like unification is creating rapid set releases to try to catch up.
Yeah.
Especially with
Hmm.
the second, like we're gonna get BT 17, 8, no, 18, 19, 20 are gonna be together. I think.
The
Or is
20
it
split
17,
split in
between
18,
two
19?
two.
sets. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 18, 19, and 20 are split between two sets. The first set is 18 and some of 19, and then the rest of 19 and 20 is going to be the
Mm-hmm.
second. And they're just going with Special Booster 2.0 and 2.5, which makes sense because we already have Special Booster 1.0 and 1.5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that is cool that they have judges, and it is cool that you could try to set up some of those niche interactions to try to understand how specific cards work to actually deepen your skill level and understanding of the game in a whole. Because I was thinking about utilizing it to practice Numemon, because I think part of the reason why I just don't like Numemon is I just don't exactly understand every inch of nuance with the deck, and something like the automated sim would help me understand some of those nuances on what's even possible.
Yeah,
Because
that's
like
true.
a card like Waru Manzemon is really weird because you could just add a card from your source and then use that same card you just added to strip it to be able to do some stuff. And it's just
Yeah.
small little things like that that just compound to make the game a little bit more intimidating and slightly harder, because if you're unaware of those types of interactions, because you're thinking that they're two separate things and you don't understand the timing of everything, then that could trip you up as a player, and something like the sim can help actually deepen your understanding. Right now, I haven't really seen anything on my end that's like deepening my understanding, but it's cool that it's there. Especially, you mentioned bot matches. That's something I haven't even touched with the server. So could you elaborate, like how good are the bots?
Oh,
What kind
Nah.
of decks do the
I've
bots
been doing
use?
Okay, so
extensive stuff with that.
the bots will use whatever. Like at the current moment, I only have Dark Knight loaded because again I wanted to test it. The bot automatically picks from the decks you have loaded.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if it's I don't know if it's at random because I only have the one deck. Concha, do
It
you
is
know
at
if?
random, yes. It'll cycle through. So I've had some where it like ends up picking the mirror, but a lot of the times it just picks one of the other decks I have.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing that I noticed with the bot is that it makes extremely simplistic plays, where a lot of the times, depending on how much memory you give it, it'll just try and use as much memory as it can without like really caring. So like sometimes it'll like go to like two, and then it'll just hard slam like megas or ultimate level Digimon, and it's just like, and I'm just like, okay, interesting.
I actually didn't have that problem. For me, maybe because it's the Dark Knight Mon deck, it's loaded. For me, I guess sort of like it would prioritize using the Digi cross effects. So like it would cross, like Mighty Axe mode with two cards in its hand. I'm like, cool, that's fine to search. But then it immediately would prioritize like because the deck plays a lot of rookies that are just meant to like suicide themselves. It'll prioritize evoing over those
Yeah,
said rookies for like three, and it's just like, I mean, that's technically not bad if you need to
that
climb
that's
to like
exactly
make an
what I was
emergency
noticing
play.
too.
But like, it does want to do like suboptimal. Again, the dev says the bot is shit, and that's understandable. They can't make a perfect bot. They can't make a bot that plays like a human. Like that's just understandable. But it is nice at least that like,
I think it just shows though that like this game is like fairly simple, but like the actual like skill gap is existent. like, because the bot's just doing simple like math. It basically just is like, okay, I have so much memory. These are the cards I have in hand. Let me use my memory as efficiently as possible. But those don't end up actually being like good plays half the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very different. Like if you're an actual combo deck, like the bot has absolutely no clue what it's doing. So like I have like a couple of like funny combo decks, or like just to see how it works on the sim. I built a like handlock deck using the old Evanwu,
Oh, okay.
and the bot is very funny in that it will always decide to discard as many cards as it can. So like I've had I've had boards set up where I get like two of them, and it'll just be like, oh, I'll just empty my entire hand so that I can unsuspend all my Digimon. I'm just like, okay, you do you.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think it doesn't fully understand like why not do anything, right? Like every time it does something, it just does it, which I think is interesting. The other thing that I was noting about the sim is that it is slow, but maybe that's a good thing in that I'm realizing that perhaps like I've started to like get so good at the certain combos and certain decks that I play that like maybe I do need to slow it down and like think a little bit more, or remember like how the interactions fully like work, because it kind of has annoyed me to no end that the game will continuously ask me for like May questions. Like, do you want to digivolve your only valid target? And I'm like, yeah, I activated the thing, so yes, I do. But okay, game,
Mm-hmm.
I'll pick something for you. Like, which is odd. Like, I do really appreciate that when it's mandatory triggers, it just does it, and I don't have to bother telling it to do something. But
Well,
it is
that's a
very
setting
funny.
too. You can tell it to do no.
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm not gonna judge on the programming prowess of the entire team to try to develop a functioning AI for the game. They probably just have slapped something together. It's cool that it's even there to try to do like some sort of like combo practice, because maybe it's bad. Like this is me reading too much into it, because maybe it's bad on purpose, because maybe you just want to see like what you can do off of this certain memory amount. I don't know. But I just chalk it up to a lack of experience, because I don't know who on the development team actually has the programming background. The game was made in Unity, or the application was made in Unity, which is uh, a decent engine in of itself, despite all of the Unity drama. It's not like they're making money off of it, so it's not like Unity's going to be knocking down
Mm-hmm.
their door for money, even if it is just on a per download basis, but they walk that back. Regardless, it is fairly simple because it is still kind of early in development. There's only 3 modes: bot, deck build, and random match. Oh, and fixed
A
match.
room.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and creating a room, which I have
Yeah.
no experience on how easy it is to create a room.
I haven't messed with that just yet either. Nobody's been online when I've been online. The one thing that I've noticed is, and hopefully, I get why it's the way it is. Like a lot of new people are trying it out, like which is nice. But I do kind of wish that there could be like a rank ladder just so that you could kind of like weed out less
That's in
competitive
development still.
peoples. Yeah. Okay.
They are working on that. It's just they needed to push this out first
Hmm.
so they could see like because they already had to bump up their server capacity and ask the community for
Yeah.
help
Hmm.
because they're like we didn't expect this many people playing the sim. So like
I
Right,
think
which
they
is a good
should have
thing.
expected it, but
well
that's
the thing is they were expecting like from the numbers they were looking at they were looking at like 500 people from the server and I'm like that makes sense 500 people for a Digimon card game tournament that's like 2 regionals level like bordering 2 regional levels of
Well,
people
now, but
playing.
yeah.
And the thing is, they were expecting like not everyone's gonna want to play. So like the server's 1,000, half of that actually plays. 500 should be fine. And then like right now they barely got it to like 1,000 capacity, so
okay.
it can handle 1,000 people. But even then, that seems low. But when you really think about it, that's like a nationals level of people.
Yeah, it is a lot of people, and there are going to be those people who just don't even go and play competitively and are just looking for this type of thing to be their replacement to just actually owning the game in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, oh, I'll just download this client? Why do I need to actually buy anything from the TCG? So there is a little bit of that, which is why they said like, hey, you should actually end up supporting the game because that's how this stuff works. Because they're making it for free and everything is accessible.
Mhm. That is kind of how Sims end up working, though. Like, so I was already seeing like some decent chatter on the Sim. Like, I watched different streamers. Like, I've even seen like VTubers playing together on this Sim, and that just goes to show that like it just making things more accessible means that like hopefully it'll help open up like people being interested in this card game. Like I remember back when I was I think still in like high school, and one of the streamers I followed, Chilled Chaos, he just out of nowhere decided he was gonna start playing Yu-Gi-Oh on the Sim, and that ended up getting him like pretty into Yu-Gi-Oh. To this day, he still like talks about Yu-Gi-Oh and collects like physical cards. Like, and I'm sure like he helped expose parts of his audience to it, and that helped boost that game.
Mhm.
Not that Yu-Gi-Oh needs it as much, but
That is true, because there's a lot of benefits to a sim, and like some people look at it and be like, oh, if a couple of guys in their basement can make something like this in a year, why can't Bandai? And there's a lot of reasons why Bandai hasn't been making a digital client. And again, a sim versus a full blown digital client are two completely different things. Like this is just a tool, a fan made tool to let the game try to be more accessible and try to, have players be able to test before they buy. That's usually the hope and intention behind Sims, is like to actually use it as a practicing tool versus a replacement itself.
yeah, which is kind of how official Sims end up going, like with their monetization and the fact that they just don't give you the cards. You have to play or buy them. It really just depends, right? Like, so I think Pokemon, because you get codes in your packs, their economy is like kind of wonky. Where I don't think that they give you that much. I think you get like maybe in like season passes, you'll maybe get like some basic decks and a couple basic cards, but that's about it, or like packs. Whereas DBZ, like that new Fusion World client, is really skimpy with its economy.
Oh, I heard it's so bad. I'm expecting
Yeah.
after a year, the client is basically going to be dead because nobody's going to be able to play it unless you're literally buying cases, and then you'll have all of the codes in the world and you'll be able to unlock all of the cards in the game. And even then, like I heard, like the fact that all of the different foils and alt arts count as completely separate cards,
Hmm.
so it really screws with your pulls. Like that's really messed up. And we're talking about a Bandai game here. Like if they're thinking about using the framework for Fusion World as the framework for Digimon, the their client is only going to be for enfranchised whales. Like there's no way a normal person is going to be able to keep up with the online version.
I think if they move the packs, they move the codes into the packs, like they presumably would have to, same as like DBZ. Like it can end up like Pokemon, where you get lots of people that only play paper, and so a lot of those codes end up on the market, and then you basically can pick them up for like pennies on the dollar, just about, and then have the online client side stuff if that's like more so what you're into. And a lot of the times you see that it's mainly like streamers that are using the online clients and stuff like that. I think that's the kind of the difference maker there, is that like at least those ones are married better, that like as you are collecting paper, you are building your collection on the client. Whereas like MTG had the nasty problem of they didn't put codes in the packs. It has its own separate economy, and basically I think it was only select products that ever had like codes. I think it was like weird like decks or other funny products that like could sometimes get you packs. But otherwise you weren't getting like you're not getting a one for one like client side and physical, which at least DBZ and Pokemon are doing right now. So as long as they do stuff like that, I think it's fine. And you will see some people that just don't care about the codes. So I know that like when I was doing Pokemon for a bit, like while the client was alive, still the old one, one of the times I would just give those codes away. I was not using the online stuff, so like I didn't have any need for them, and that's kind of something that you see still. I think right now it's a little messed up and exacerbated for DBZ just because DBZ's brand new and Bandai's really bad about printing new games.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I didn't realize until looking at Eggman's website that Fusion World had literally their first regional. Like the game has been out, like they're about to get their second set, and they now just had their first actual tournament in the English side of things. Like JP, I can't really say JP had like big tournaments because they just don't. Like their big tournament is not what we would define big at all. Like their big tournaments like what 32 players. So yeah, them having Japanese tournaments is all people were really looking at on top of Eggman when he hosted tournaments himself. But I didn't realize it took them almost 3 full months before they got their first actual tournament. Like, that's crazy to me. But then again, like you said, the game also does have a digital client. It is a unified game. So there's other factors in play here on why that might have been a thing. But like, I know One Piece also has a fan made online client. I don't know if Dragon Ball ever had one because they have, the Bandai one, even though the economy's not that great and it's probably the worst form of testing unless you already have all the cards. But yeah, is One Piece's fan made one automated or no?
Yes, it is up there.
Is it fully automated with the rules and card interactions, or is it just certain aspects are automated?
Certain aspects are like it'll ask you for targets and stuff. Like for the most part, the rulings I think are correct. From the little I've played of the sim, like mainly it'll ask you, it'll do like you have to tell it to summon, it'll suspend the dawn, declare targets, it'll ask you for counter step timing, for blocker timing, it'll ask you if you want to resolve triggers. Like for the most part, it is automated, but it won't like. I think the one thing it doesn't do is no, it's pretty much automated, yeah.
Okay. Because I know theirs is web based.
Oh wait, which one are you? Wait, hold up. The One Piece sim?
Yeah.
No, it's another. It's like this one. It's standalone.
Oh, it is? I didn't even know.
Yeah, for the one for OPTCG sim.
Okay, that would make sense on why it would be automated because usually if they're like web based or something like tabletop where it's just an image pack essentially, usually those aren't going to be automated. They're a little bit easier to get past like copyright laws and whatever. As so like the big thing with this client is there's a couple of things that we kind of generally have to avoid, which is like use of official Bandai assets. That's something that Bandai would attack them for, which because it's so customizable, they just say, hey, look, we didn't really create those like other people did. And it's not like they're officially in the game. They changed and modified the files in order to get it to that state. So I think like they're making the correct moves to where so that Bandai doesn't just straight up attack them. Because Bandai, like a lot of other Japanese companies, they are very lawyer heavy in terms of the legalese behind stuff like this, which is why they're like the team is handling it as tactfully as they can, and like why we have to download the images and they're not supplying any, which is why they have a scraper and all that stuff. So I think they're doing a really good job so far. And like you said, it will eventually get some of the features that we're looking for because right now the random match is best of one, which that's whatever. Japanese is best of one. It's not that big of a deal. But if I wanted to like hardcore grind or test something, then it would have been nice for the option of best of three. But again, I know that's just more things that they have to program. And if they're having a hard enough time trying to keep up with all the cards, because they should be constantly, because we know all the way up to BT 17 fully, and EX7 is still being spoiled. Like, they need to try to focus on cards first, features later, because once they get the cards in, they could do whatever they want with some of the features on the side. So, but I'm glad that the client exists because as a content creator, like I find it sometimes a little bit hard to do practice games or just being able to have the time to record meaningful gameplay footage, like just on the random outside of playing in events, because I do, spoiler, work an actual job. So between job, social life, and YouTube, I don't have that much time. And something like the simulator is actually like oddly addictive for me because best of ones, they don't take that long if you know what you're doing. Like matches probably go anywhere from like 5 to 15 minutes. So it's not like I'm sitting down and playing an hour game of League of Legends where I have to commit a whole extra buttload of time. So it allows me to be able to like, oh, I could probably just block out a time I'm playing and then I could just record and then I could just either script while I'm playing or do a script in post and do some commentary over it. So it allows me as a content creator to have like extra freedom on how I could try to give content to like gameplay content to players. And because everything is automated, they get to see all of the interactions and how I'm triggering them. So there's from a viewer aspect, I think it's pretty cool. You mentioned Hancho that you were watching VTubers.
Hmm.
Uh, I this is a shock to me. Like, are they VTubers known for TCG stuff, or just random YouTubers that just have a VTube
I
avatar?
Yeah, and so I was watching, I believe, her name's Nova. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know, remember exactly, but um, basically a lot of her content, like, well, at least the streams that I watch, are her doing like TCG stuff. So, Nova Ako Kami from V Reverie, she does a lot of like Master Duel and like Yu-Gi-Oh, and she's been doing some of the Digimon stuff. So I watched her playing the Digimon sim with another VTuber, and then I've even seen that she's done some Yu-Gi-Oh content with like notable like Yu-Gi-Oh um like YouTube personalities, as well as I think she got to do one with Rosemi from um Niji Sanji, so fairly popular company. And Rosemi's well known for doing Yu-Gi-Oh streams where she just likes to like cutesy characters like the trap tricks and stuff like that.
Okay, because I think like from a marketing aspect, like having a sim is not a bad thing, especially if it gets people who usually don't play the game to actually, play and show off the game because exposure is huge. Like the way that marketing is handled in today's industry is completely different than marketing was 10 years ago because of the rise of influencers. It's just like, "Oh, why would I put in a random billboard or like a pack of drones to do an event, like I don't know, to show off something when I could just have a YouTuber or VTuber streamer just be able to have that reach a wider audience. And if you give it out to multiple people, especially if it's free like the simulator, then it could potentially grow and Bandai like grow the game and Bandai wouldn't even know about it where this growth is coming from, which I think is kind of cool. Cuz that's one thing like these simulators help do is overall they're a net positive. Sure, there is the aspect where people just won't ever buy the game pieces ever, but it can make collectors, like you said, it could expose new people to to the game just by having a YouTuber or influencer stream it. So there's a lot that there's a lot of good that could come from it. So this leads me to think like I don't think Bandai is going to immediately go after them. I also don't think Bandai is going to immediately rush to try to make their own client, despite this one already having some pretty decent success with just the bare bone basic features that it has. Digimon's in a really interesting position because of unification, where we will be on par with Japan eventually next year, but how would Bandai even start making their own client if they were even to? Because if they were, they're probably just going to immediately copy Fusion World's framework, and that economy sucks. Like, it just straight up is bad. So I'm hoping if they do create their own, that they at least make it a little bit more user friendly. But
Like I said, I think it's fine if they do what they're doing with that game, which is giving you the codes. If they don't and they leave the economy kind of as it is, or like try and copy a um arena like MTG Arena style, like I don't think that it's gonna be successful for Digimon.
because the market's already extremely saturated with games and clients as is.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like us being as of unification 20 sets in, like how does Bandai even begin to start thinking of making a client? Like, do they start with set 1 or do they make the first 20 sets free, or like how does that, what does that even look like? Because I'm used to usually games when they come out, they're either purely digital, or if they do have a physical tie-in, it's been in there for literally ever, like ground one. Like Pokemon can kind of get away with it because of rotation. So even if they
Same
get
as MTG.
yeah, so even if they get a new client, like, oh, we could just, here's a new code pack that works with this client. We're advertising this as of this set. And like it just will naturally transition into the new client. Because Pokemon's had a couple of clients and none of them were good.
Mm-hmm.
Magic's had one client and it was almost never good. I beta tested that client and it was a functional thing, but in terms of like, you know, do you have a friends list? No. Can you chat? No. Like, what are we doing? These are basic functions and features.
I think the one thing that was nice about it is, again, it being an auto sim meant that with Magic being like decently complex, that like it was a decent enough tool to like learn the game. Like that's kind of where like I learned a lot of my basic understanding of the card game, and then I moved on to like figuring it out via those basics.
Yeah, and I think like Bandai actually has some previous framework to be able to have a better teaching tool than the tutorial app, which I didn't realize they cut the original 3 starter decks. I think that was like wrong because there's no reason to cut those starter decks. Maybe it was to save on file size and file space because of the card programming and the assets and images that are going into it. I don't know, but I think like what was like if that literally just it could have been its literal own thing where it's like, yeah, every starter deck is on the tutorial app. Like how cool would that have been to just get people to understand the basics of the mechanics?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I get that the newer starter decks, which were the War Greymon and Metal Garurumon, the black and the purple ones, they were supposed to teach you Ace, and then they just already have every other card type in the game, so it's just like, do you really need the old starter decks? I think the old starter decks just would have helped add variety. So that way, like, you could have had different lessons on what each of the different colors do,
Mm-hmm.
and like I feel like they could have made their tutorial app better to actually make it a more accessible teaching tool. But I guess that doesn't matter anymore because we have the online sim. And strangely enough, like they included the availability to play it on Steam Deck, and I have one, and I'm just like, do I actually download this on my Steam Deck? I keep thinking of that question.
I do think though that moving forward, if like Bandai starts to wise up about how they're kind of handling their client, like we do know that apparently DBZ's client is going to move to like be an arcade machine with like card readers, which is kind of fun.
Are you
But
kidding me?
yeah, they
That's
dropped
such
like
a
some promotion
Japanese
about
thing
it.
to do.
Yeah, but like everything there like could work. Like so they can go back and get all the models like from the old games if they really don't want to like build new models for like a lot of guys. This could be like how Pokemon like for the longest time has used the same 3D assets and they've steadily gotten worse. Like some of the Pokemon have lost animations throughout the generations, but they can do stuff like that so that like you can actually see the little physical like representation of your characters. Like I think DBZ has a much easier time of doing it in the sense that like a lot of the characters are like the same guy. Like you can have like the same model like copy pasted a bunch of times.
Yeah, how many Goku Super Saiyan 3s are in the Dragon Ball Masters game, just as an
Right.
example? It's just
Yeah.
like, because there is a fewer cast of characters, they could definitely get away with it.
Like you could maybe argue it for One Piece, but like there's some rationale for it not being as clean. But the main thing that I think is that realistically, they need to add to that client something like how Master Duel has in the solo play, like the funny little like learn an archetype sort of things, where like it also just gives you like lore details too. I think could be beneficial. Like you would think that they could just like do stuff that's like kind of saga related. So like maybe you play against an opponent that's like got a deck that's kind of themed around like the Android Saga or whatever, which is doable in set one since like Android 17 basically does that. Next set you have Cell and you can like do that too. Like I
Yeah,
think that aspects of that could be cool, especially for Digimon, where like Digimon is kind of like a very weird IP in that like a lot of lore is like hidden behind like old dusty video games that like had complex systems that make them kind of slogs when you were a kid and make them like kind of a chore to go back to play. Even though like the storytelling was pretty good, it's just like mechanics wise, like they just made funny decisions.
it was funny. I was talking with, I think it was my coworker about that, where it's just like, yeah, they never, like, the big difference between, like, Digimon and Pokemon is Pokemon knew what it was and never changed. Digimon never had, like, a core gameplay loop that defines the game. They tried to do that with like the genres where it's just like, okay, here's the cyber sleuth games. Well, there's two of them and they're both going to play exactly the same because
They
they're
they play like personas slash
yes.
Shimigames.
Um but like every other, like if you think about it, every other Digimon game literally does something different. World 1 is a pet simulator. World
Mm-hmm.
2 is a roguelike dungeon crawler. World 3 is a traditional JRPG. World 4
Yep.
is a Diablo hack and slash.
Yep.
Like they've never concretely said this is what a Digimon game is. The closest that we get are the stories games, which play like JRPGs,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of like this side world games where they are all pet simulators because you had Arise and Re-Arise, and those played like Digimon World 1, and then you had New or Next Order, which again played like Digimon World 1. So it seems like they're trying to figure out how to unify their gameplay in terms of like actually having a core identity. But that would be cool if maybe they take the Yu-Gi-Oh approach like Bandai, and they'll do like Digimon World Championship 2025, and it's going to have every card all the way up to a certain point, and there's no, they could technically update it, but there would be light updates, if any, and it's just its own standalone thing, and they could just re-release basically the same game every year and just have the card pool change each time. I don't know. I'm just spinning my wheels on like how they could approach making an online client work now, because it is kind of complicated to just have 20 sets worth of cards to just be like, yeah, we're going to have a way to catch all these players up.
Hmm. Right. You could always do like what Master Duel does, right? Where it's its own wonky little format where they have most of the cards, but they don't have everything, and then they have their own like different rule set. So like, could always be an avenue, and I have always felt that it could be interesting if we could actually figure out like alternative formats that aren't like really bad to play.
I mean,
So like
Yu-Gi-Oh's
when we were doing
alternative
Ulti Cups.
format, yeah,
Hmm.
Yu-Gi-Oh's alternative format is just time snippets. It's just like, what's the new popular one? Edison, I think. I don't
Yeah,
even know
so
when Edison is.
Edison is early Synchro era.
Okay, yeah. So like that's because I'm familiar with like Goat. It's like you got
Hmm.
Goat and then you got Edison. These are all just time snippets, and
Yeah.
maybe that's what Digimon is gonna have to do with the
Oh
base
God, no!
design.
Please, I don't need to go back to blue hybrid format. I really don't.
I think the
I
biggest
don't
problem
think we'll have one for a while if we do have like a dedicated time-stamped format,
I
because
mean, that was what the blocks were supposed to be. Is like block 1, block 2. Like,
yeah, but the
thankfully they
problem
never went through with it. But like,
no, but the problem
honestly, if I
is
have
you
to
get
replay
cards.
blue hybrid format, I'm gonna kill somebody.
The problem with block format is you get cards that literally are supposed to interact with the next set, and then the next
Mm.
set is in the next block, and then you're just like, oh, this does not work anymore. Got it.
Or in the case of the Three Muskets, like Three Muskets have accidental synergy with the old stuff. It's like, yeah, no, we completely changed where the deck was. The Gallon is like the biggest offender, because like depending on how you build the Gallon, like if you're going the black Megidramon and the black Wargramon that are the original names, like the virus types, like they're more like I mill myself out, where like classic Gallon's just like I'm gonna blow you up, and then for every card in your trash, I'll hit you really hard. But my main priority is just I'm gonna kill you by DP deletion.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I think is that like I don't know that they'd be interesting. So like Edison and Goat are kind of cool because they were kind of like old busted cards that just everybody ignored. Like they just never ended up on the radar.
Mm-hmm.
But now like you play Goat and you'll actually like see like cards that weren't very common um like I think there's like a funny combo people do with like Gearford the Iron Knight and like the like Blast Chain or something, like silly cards like that, that like maybe were around and I just didn't really remember, but like realistically I don't recall those being like the main strategies, like the main combos, right?
Don't
Like Goat
forget
and
for Go format, like Chaos was quote unquote the best deck in our memory. But when COVID hit
but
and everyone went
they
back to go to do it again, they're like, no, yeah, no, Chaos is like the third best deck. It's not
no, no,
even
no,
that
but
great to be honest.
yeah, exactly, and they also eroded it, so like it's not even the same anyway, so it doesn't matter. Like that's the other thing is that like erratas happen that have completely changed those cards. Like you can't really go back and play the old formats, and like I said, new knowledge tells us that like certain cards that have existed for quite some time that like got ignored until like somebody was like, oh, this card's actually busted, and now you're like, oh, when you go back and you play Go, you're like playing some of those cards that like
Mhm.
realistically weren't getting touched before.
Yeah, the only time
Mhm.
we've ever had that happen in Digimon is literally EX2, when people were just like, yo, so Blue Hybrids is actually still the best deck in the game. That was literally it. It took 1.5 sets off and then started coming back in hardcore force because it just was that good. Um, but that's like the closest we've ever had to that situation happen, which is why I think like maybe a pre and post unification format might be interesting to explore, where it's just like, okay, this is what the game was like pre unification, so it would basically just be the first 20 sets as its own, and then you'd have like your post unification. It's not like the greatest example, but that's like the closest that I can think of to like, oh, where is a good cutoff. um and it's not like a whole like Pokemon rotation or Magic Modern where there's like specific set where it starts. You could kind of make that argument if you really wanted to, but like I don't know. I think
Hmm.
Digimon definitely it's in a rough spot for trying to create a interesting secondary format. And the commander clones are not the answer. I will spoil that right now. They are not the answer.
I think they're just so like antithetical to like what Digimon kind of is that it's too hard to like fully grok. Like I've seen where it's like, oh, pick a tamer and pick like one of your like megas or something, and then like they get to be in a command zone type of thing. But it's like I don't know that it works. And to be honest, trying to do singleton in Digimon like is kind of rough. Like I know that like some people really like Pokemon has its own kind of commander version, right? Gym leader challenge, right? Where you just pick a type and then you're like locked in and it's singleton. But like they also have a giant swath of sets that they can pick cards from. So there are very many Bulbasaurs that you can pick. But
And even
certain
then,
characters in Digimon don't have that same level of support. So like realistically, you force everybody to be in like, oh, we're Greymons or Garuru decks, and or the other guys that like get a good lion's share of the support, like Vmon.
Machine Dramon technically because it's all like cyborg machine
Mhm.
stuff, and then Green was another good simpleton deck just because all of Green was like Digizorb and Suspend Kill.
Yeah, they had very similar mechanics to one another, which led them to being incidentally more consistent. Because, like, Digimon at the end of the day is a game of consistency. Like, consistency is king. Sure, you could have a deck with insane high ceiling in terms of damage potential, but the decks that we're seeing win are the decks that are the most consistent. And right now, Numemon, Mirage, and Red Hybrids, whether people like to acknowledge it or not, they are right now some of the most consistent decks in the game, which is why they're doing well, is because, oh, if you can't find your pieces, you're not playing the game, where these decks, it's pretty easy to find their pieces. Yeah. Especially with the new BT16 Ukamon. That card's like actually stupid in every way, shape, and form.
Trust me, I've been trying to see if I want to play that in Mirage, and it just comes down to
no. You do.
You don't.
I 100% would play that in Mirage. I would play that in Lugamon because when I was going back and
so Lugamon's issue is that your egg's kind of important for like the actual stack. So like it's a lot harder. I was testing it for 16. Like I was only doing 3 of them just to help me see pieces.
I would only do 2.
And a lot of the times, like I would put it there and I would raise, and then I'd be like, "All right, I'm doing my combo," and it's like, "Oops, that guy has the egg. This guy doesn't."
Yeah, Ukamon is just a piece of crap sitting on the board with the egg. He literally has my sweater. I can't do anything without my sweater. And Mirage is kind of the same way. Like, it's just, like, the source doesn't matter because the egg is there. It's just the fact that a lot of times with Mirage, you want to evo up the stack quickly. And since Uko just promotes the egg, it's good for, like, when you're kind of, like, in that middle ground or, like, this stack can die. I really don't care. But against decks where you're just like, no, I just gotta explode the moment I can, Ukomon just kind of becomes a deterrent because you'll never put him in raising.
No, so my argument for utilizing Ukomon, he's not going to be a high quantity for those combo based decks, but like if you see him in your early stages of the game, you will want to like turn 1 raise like digivolve into him and raising, then your turn 2 raise him out, and then you're going to want to swing with him. So I was learning in Lugamon, getting that first check as early as possible is like actually insanely important, because them being at 4 security means they could die to your combo versus 5 security where you need to come up with an extra way to deal that 1 extra damage because your numbers are off because of how Alliance works. And Mirage, it's kind of in the similar vein where the more damage you deal early on, the less you're going to need in order to just kill them once you go full Unga Bunga. Because, like, in order to make, like, 7 attacks in a single turn, you're going to need to have a full back row of Tamers and a whole bunch of other stuff going right for you in terms of memory management. But, like, the more early chip that you can do leads to making your combos easier and cleaner, which is why I would still consider running Ukamon as, like, a tech 2 of.
Right, it kind of depends. So, like, in decks like that, where, like, to be honest, your rookie lineup has never mattered.
No,
in
I mean,
in Mirage and in Luga.
Yeah, you're looking for a specific inheritable. Yeah, you're just looking in Mirage, you're ideally looking for a specific inheritable. And the fact that Ukamon hatches a new egg means you get a reset right away, making the deck even more consistent. So, like, turn two, after raising out Ukamon, seeing four or more cards, depending on your egg, in a single turn is, like, absolutely insane.
Hmm.
But, yeah, so but this is why like these simulators are helpful tools is because we could try to like playtest and understand these decks in a more quick and rapid succession, not necessarily needing to commit the resources to figure stuff out where it's just like, oh, let's just pretend there is a world where Magnamon X Antibody isn't the best deck. um, and it takes a while for people to realize that, but if you already knew that because you were testing, that's something that goes into your decision making process on how you're going to be approaching the set. Sure, it might like ruin some of the sales, but like I don't know. I don't think it would be that impactful on the sales overall.
Yeah, I mean, but that's always been kind of like where EN has been, anyways, right? So like, Bandai can print like a big, fancy looking secret rare, but it doesn't mean that it's gonna move product if like we see that JP like has decided that that card's not worth playing. Like it just doesn't have a home, so like there's no point.
Yeah, that's kind of where what's his face? Grace Nova is. Because I was looking at a lot of JP builds for the Sun and Moon deck, and oddly enough, they cut Grace Nova out. Then they started running Mirage instead. And I was just like, wait, hold up. Am I missing something here? They're playing Mirage using the Grace engine. I'm lost.
To be honest, that engine is like kind of crazy if you actually get to see your pieces. It's just that like the main reason that I still think Grace Nova has a home is that like if you can actually get full combo, you get to be a level 7 Digimon that has multiple checks, has protection, has removal on swing, and the main thing is that it has protection because like its biggest problem is that like you invest so many resources into like these bodies that like if they don't end up getting all the way or like just get outed by like simple removal, you are like really screwed. Because like basically like you built a single stack that ate two like lines, like two whole family lines in it, and you're just like, cool. So if I lose this, I kind of don't have much to like rebuild with, even with the fact that like that deck is pretty good about like replacing a lot of the cards that you use because it knows that you like are building these really funny stacks.
'Cause I was about to say, Grace Nova can't protect itself either, can it?
Grace
It,
Nova
it can
can.
protect itself.
Yeah.
So that's the one reason that I still think that it kind of does have a home, and then I get why they were cutting it though. Like I was seeing like more successful lists just weren't running it, and I think it's because like a lot of the times you kind of tunnel vision to trying to get to Grace.
Yeah, when his level sixes are already just good enough, and apparently Mirage is also just good enough for them to want to run. But that's
Mhm.
something like I was looking at, and I would never have thought of doing that because of some of the consistency issues, because Mirage isn't one of the card types that the deck cares about. But apparently it has just a decent amount of natural card draw where it still just ends up seeing it, and Mirage is still just one of the more ideal level sixes because of just how good that card is.
Mhm.
But that's just using future knowledge. And like, if I was a Grace Nova player and I saw all of Japan playing Grace Nova and not using that card, like, that would impact my decision if I need Grace Nova or not.
Mhm.
And we definitely saw that with like Anubis, Apocalypse, basically anything that was the boogeyman in Japan immediately was some of the most expensive stuff here. And thank God Digimon is not that expensive of a game. Although I do think BT16, because of the like the popularity of everything in that set, it is positioning itself to be on the more expensive side.
Mm-hmm.
But thank God we're not One Piece level expensive and stupid. $200 for a box, $150 for basically the equivalent of an EX set. I'm just like, what are we doing here?
With no playable leaders.
Right.
None of those leaders have seen any success in official tournaments. So, like, realistically, you're getting it because you want Bon Clay, because Bon Clay goes into the new Law deck, and you need Kid Killer that go into the new Law deck. But, like, that's about it. Like, most of the other support pieces are for, like, lackluster decks. Like, Baroque Works get support, but Baroque Works was already struggling, and these new cards are not enough to, like, make you competitive.
Yeah, it almost feels exactly like EX1, where EX1 felt like on paper it should have just been a home run, but when all of the cards came out, they were already just dead on arrival because all of the decks that they were trying to either make or support were A, non-existent, or B, just bad. So like it's weird seeing One Piece have just such a completely different trajectory than Digimon when it came to this. I think it's just because the demand is just that much greater, which is not that much of a surprise. But maybe eventually One Piece will catch on that their game shouldn't be as expensive as it is. And like it makes me happy that Digimon is generally as cheap as it is. Because like if I really wanted to try to just secret rare hunt, like it's not that hard.
Well, the fact that you can
Cause
actually find product on shelves, like, is the main thing. Like, more
yes.
often than not, if I find any product, it's like marked up to high hell, and it just isn't very enticing. Like, so the idea that like I should gamble my $15 for like the chance at like decent cards when it's a Bandai card game, a lot of cards are pack filler. They are like no home loser idiots. Like, and that's just the sad reality of it. That it just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense a lot of the times. Like, if you're not actually buying like a full box where you're guaranteed like supers and like a secret rare and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think like Digimon's design lets it be a little bit more generous, I guess. Like in the early days, like yeah, the bad cards were immediately like discarded and were just pack filler, but it feels like we're getting less and less pack filler because the way they design their sets is based on evolutionary lines. So as long as that line sees any kind of player support, like all of those cards immediately are something you should look at, which I think is kind of fun. But I know with you mentioned Broke Works, like they kind of have like that similar type of thing where it's just like, yeah, as long as they just fit inside of this typing, like it should see some support as long as that deck sees any kind of play. And Dragon Ball's also like that. A lot of Bandai card games are just designed like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as we kind of mentioned last week, like decks that are made for you versus decks that aren't have completely different power levels.
I've been kind
Completely.
of interested in like maybe as like a joke tournament or something. Like, everybody has to go on to like the official Bandai site and pull one of the deck lists that they built. Like, if you've seen, Big Ukamon is a Numemon shell, according to Bandai,
Yeah.
which I think is interesting. That like some of these deck lists that they come up with, some of them are like pretty like paint by numbers, like here or there. Like, so I think for the Dawn and Dusk deck, it was basically like what you would expect. But the only like interesting new piece that they put in it is that they wanted you to play um BT11 Biomon, like to fill up your last rookie slot. I'm trying to remember what else was in that list. I'd have to go back and
I think
look.
they
But
had
like,
like some weird option too, like another option.
mm-hmm. But
But
yeah, but I just think it'd be funny to like actually play like the decks that Bandai thinks that people would be playing.
the
Like
interesting thing about those decks is they actually do improve over time. Like if you look at some of their earlier ones, they were just hot garbage. And at least now you can look at one and be like, okay, that's at least somewhat competent. It's not great, but it's competent. Like
mm-hmm.
it's like you said, it's if Bandai envisioned you were to play the deck, this is how they're picturing it, and their picture is obviously extremely skewed and not very good compared to the reality.
Mm-hmm.
But they're doing it partially because some of those decks just are not good, period. Like Big Ukamon is not really a deck. So what were they supposed to do to try to promote Big Ukamon on their website with? Well, oh, Numemon is popular. Numemon doesn't need rookies. There's 8 Ukamons. They're all rookies. This makes sense. All right, let's go. Technically, they could have made Big Ukamon out of what's his face, Belfmon also, because
Hmm.
Belfmon really doesn't need his rookies outside of Proto, the Gizumon stuff. So it's just like, yeah, you could just have 8 Ukamon, and I know this is how you actually build the deck: is you have 8 Ukamon and then you have your Gizumon, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that the big thing for me though is just the fact that like you would think that Bandai would notice that like in green we did do this weird thing where we kind of cared about like breeding. Like the egg deck has like support pieces from like three different green tamers, and you think that maybe that would make sense because that entire deck's whole purpose is just to like spit out all your eggs and then reuse your eggs. Like and in that like looping of that, you're supposed to get big Ugos, and big Ugos are supposed to like be your ability to control the game state while you're just aggressing with like little babies.
see, that would be something interesting, but unfortunately, Bandai didn't exactly do that.
Yeah. So because if we remember right, there's OG Mimi who lets you hatch eggs and lets you push them out into raising, which
Yeah,
is exactly what that deck would want to be doing. You'd think there was the Willis that like recite hatches an egg. There was
Yoshino,
the
that puts
Yoshino
an
that
egg back.
puts an egg back from trash. Yeah, you'd be like, maybe you could have done something here, but they were just like, no.
Yeah, no, there definitely was some interesting design space that they could explore. Some of it might be a little bit on the dangerous side, but I think with how bad Big Ukamon actually is as a card, like it probably would have been fine.
I mean, on paper, like you're cheating out a mega for like three or whatever. Like, should have been good, but like, yeah, just wasn't there.
I mean, when you could spit out a mega for 3 and then it dies, or you could spit out a mega for how much does it cost in yellow vaccine and it doesn't die.
Oh, one most of the time.
Yeah, so you could spit out a mega for 1, or you could spit out a mega for 3. Which one sounds more enticing and better? Like, and Bandai has to know some of their cards are just that absurdly stupid. So,
Yeah.
but Nikki, you previously said that they're going to be releasing BT16 on the Sim 2 weeks after BT16 actually comes out. Do you know of any plans when they're trying to release the EX6 and
Generally, that's the
BT17?
schedule they want to keep, is about 1 to 2 weeks after something releases, just because they need time to code it. Obviously, some of it is like we already know up to BT 17 some stuff, so like they should, like, in theory,
Yeah,
they
they
can
should
get to
already
working.
be working on the code just to try to keep up to date, because usually the whole point on trying to have those simulators is to be as
The
up to
other
date as
problem is
possible.
that we need to keep in mind this is non-profit. They're not a job, so a lot of
I
people are coming
know.
home from work,
I
and
know.
with regional starting back up, a lot of these developers might be card game players. We don't know exactly who's doing what, so like it might just come down to like, hey, the people developing right now are going to a regional. We're gonna be down for a bit, or like, again, competitive season is coming up, so a lot of people are just kind of like getting ready for for regionals, getting it for store stuff, Evo Cup,
I mean, for the
and people
longer
have jobs.
metas, 2 weeks isn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because we've been in what, BT15 for almost 3 months. Like, 2 weeks, like that's nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just the short metas like BT16, where it is just like they are gonna have to put like almost overtime if they're gonna try to make it so it's always gonna be 2 weeks after. Which it like makes sense because it makes players want to get the cards and then test in a more safe environment with the cards that they already have. I don't know. I just think like, oh, for rapid iteration and testing, this is going to be pretty good, even if it is going to be coming 2 weeks late every single time. Because we're going to be in EX6 BT15 for like what, 3 4 months. So like, if we get the sim caught up on EX6 for at least 2 of those 3 months, like that's still pretty worth it in terms of what you could gain out of the sim. And even like when we hit
Um,
BT16, uh, it's just you will have like a couple of decks that aren't in that meta for EX6.
The EX6 meta mainly just brings its own new decks. Like, it doesn't have much support pieces for existing decks. Because the problem becomes is that they kind of just replace a lot of old pieces. Like, I think the only one that, like, realistically was getting new parts, but is also just not fully a deck right now, is Devimon. Like, the Dan Devimon stuff. Like,
Oh,
actually
yeah.
gets a lot of support in EX6, but,
Yeah, but
like...
he wasn't really a deck in Japan
Mhm.
either.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen any toppings with him on the Japanese meta that from what I
Mhm.
follow.
Yeah, so all of the new EX6 decks are basically just that. They're new EX6 decks. Like,
Yeah, but
mm,
if only two of them are meta defining, then like I think having it be 2 weeks late is like kind of just whatever. It's just like okay, you actually just have to preemptively learn a little bit more on the two decks that matter and your
yeah,
matchups into them.
there's just like one card that you are gonna have to keep your eye out for, and that is the level 5 black piece from the new Legend Arms pieces. Is that guy just being able to slot in under anything and give it generic protection? Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we were. He almost feels like he should have just been a plugin. Like we tried to get a plugin with that type of effect, it just didn't pan out because I think the plugin was just too expensive.
Yeah.
Because it was what defense plugin cost 5.
Well, that one gave you blocker and reboot, like,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
about it. Like,
No, it
I
also
think it maybe
prevents.
gave you, yeah, you couldn't be like removed from the board by like certain effects. I don't think it was like full
Yeah, there was another
decent protection.
There was another promo plugin. That gave
Yeah,
you
it's the yellow
protection.
one.
Yeah, one of the yellow ones.
hmm I don't remember which one that is
Uh,
exactly right now. I don't think it's pause. I think it's whatever the
it's
other one is called.
reload.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, when this Digimon would be deleted by battle, it's only by battle. You get to place reload plugin from this Digimon's Digivolution source into their security stack to prevent the deletion. That card's just good.
Mm-hmm.
And then it does have a security ability to minus security tech plus, and its main ability puts it under a non-white Digimon. But I still think that the Legend Arm level 5 is going to be better. Not Brywee, Ludamon.
hmm
But 2 weeks wait late isn't going to be that big a deal, especially since it is just a non-profit fan-based project. Because there's other ways that we could be testing in the meantime while we're waiting for it, which from my perspective will make gameplay a little bit awkward at times when the new set rolls around. But after the new set, when it's done rolling around, then I should just be like back to being able to create good gameplay.
hmm
So it's cool that we have the sim. Thank you, Huang, even though I'm banned from your server. So I can't see any updates. I at least have teammates who are not banned from his server. So that's cool. Thank you, Huang and company, for creating the sim. I hope everyone is able to download the sim that wants to. I have told my friends that they should, because one of my friends, he's like, slightly into Digimon, but he's not like enfranchised, and this will be a good way for me to play with him and be like, hey, we could test out what deck you want to make or like any updates to your deck, and we could have like just fun dicking around with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be a fun tool. I think the game as a whole is moving in a good direction. Outside of all we need is a new ban and restriction list, and we pretty much should be in a good spot.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good time to wrap things up. So I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed, again, please support by sharing it with others on social media so that way we could get it to spread. And I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your time, and we will see you next time.